All right, guys, real quick, I want to go over our sponsors. First up, Healthy Made Easy by Mitchell Thompson. Phenomenal book, making nutrition and a healthier lifestyle, very simplified. Go check it out at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. Also, he has a gym that's open, Combat Cardio KC. They go hand in hand. If you're trying to meet fitness goals, trying to have fun workouts, that's the place to be. They'll get you right over there. Next up, Yup Strength. Love the smelling salts. Love the pre-workout. Best tasting pre-workout I've ever had. The smelling salts are a hit with everybody. Really does wonders for you during the middle of a hard set. Love what he's doing over there, John. Doing a great job. Our last one, Jit Head Athletics. Jeremy, he's doing a great job with that company. Rash guards are fun, good material. They're doing cool stuff over there. All the TBAP merch is over there. If you guys want to help support the show, I greatly appreciate it. We got rash guards, t-shirts, head on over there. It really helps get the name out. So yeah, thanks again to all our sponsors. Thank you to everyone who watches and listens to the show. Please, if you could, like, share, subscribe. It really helps out. And yeah, we'll get back to the show. God, well, I lost all that shit.
No.
All right. Well,
It's okay.
we lost about 5 minutes. We have my brother here today. Dominic couldn't be with us today. He had an emergency, but yeah, I forgot to hit the record button.
Yeah, well.
It's the first time for everything, right? What I was saying, our whole pothole stories and stuff like that you guys
everybody's
missed.
going to miss out
Everyone's
on the
going to miss
potholes.
out on that. Basically, to sum it up, be careful where you're driving right now because you're going to need new suspension and new tires, more than likely. The potholes are insane right now. But if you could, super excited to have you on today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking at all your stuff. Amazing work. I'm very curious to kind of learn the details of what it is you do, your podcast, how you got started, all that. So if you could kind of give me like a background and how this all started for you.
Yeah. It's been a bunch of things. So I'm primarily what I do is I'm a therapist, and I've been a therapist for 16 and a half years. And got into mental health just in general because I always knew that I wanted to help people in some capacity. There was a time I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a social worker for a while. And I did some things sort of in the social work realm and realized like that's actually not for me exactly. But when I learned about this whole career of being a therapist, I thought, well, I can help people actually solve their problems, like the deep issues. Whereas social work, and I don't mean to put anybody down for their work, social work at times feels like putting a Band-Aid onto problems versus helping people solve their problems.
I don't think you're far off from that because I personally have seen that. I know an individual that's been working in daycare and stuff like that and has had to deal with like state, what's that called? You know where they call the state when they have to get involved with certain
like Child
things.
Protective Services,
stuff
or
like that,
Department of Children and Family Services.
And like you said, we're not trying to down because we know that everybody's not like that. But sometimes some of these people just seem like it's a job and it's no longer people anymore, and it just seems to, go through the motions and nothing really goes anywhere, and it kind of just fades away, or I guess it's kind of a. It's not always black and white. It's kind of a gray area, but it's just.
Well, they're super overworked, and
for sure.
They've got way too much responsibility to actually give the attention needed to any given problem.
Right.
And that's how it ends up being that way. I mean, people get into social work because they genuinely want to help people, but then they're not really well equipped to do it.
So maybe also a mix of maybe more updated training, possibly holding employees accountable more too, because I've kind of seen where, we look at government jobs and they kind of have, it's like you get one and you have it for life. You know what I mean? There's really no accountability. I can't speak that for everybody. It's just what I've heard and what I've seen. And so maybe they need to change that as well. And they need to kind of change some things up, you know, to where maybe they have better training. You know, they're looking at their employees more on what they're doing, what they're accomplishing, stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's a lot that could stand
Right.
to change
Right.
within
Right.
the whole system,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I mean, just having like dipped my toe into that, and I was like, yeah, that's not going to be for me. But what is for me is helping people manage the really deeper issues and improve their lives, improve their relationships. And so I became a therapist. And originally, I was working with kids a lot. For several years, I worked with kids, and then kind of shifted a bit into more general counseling, mostly with adults and a little bit with kids. And then over the last several years, I've been specializing in perinatal mental health. And so that includes pregnancy, postpartum, infertility, and loss, and really just everything that kind of is connected with those things. And so and just to kind of throw a little bit more in there, I've taught at the college level in the past, and then I'm actually teaching again. I had a podcast for a few years called the Holistic Fertility and Wellness Podcast, and now recently started the Motherhood in America. And I have a full-time job as the director of student counseling at a local university. So, yeah, so their a lot.
Yeah,
a lot
a lot
going
of stuff.
on.
Why did you choose it's perinatal?
Perinatal.
Right. Yeah, I was telling you earlier I was going to mess that up.
It's a tricky word.
Why did you choose that route out of all the types of therapy that there is?
Yeah, and I didn't know that it was a specialty until not long before I got into it. A lot of therapists don't actually. No, like it's a big missing piece actually in graduate programs that a lot of graduate programs for counseling are not teaching about perinatal mental health. And I got into it after several years of infertility and loss. We finally had a baby. And I personally had this expectation that like after all of the infertility and loss that like once I have a baby, I'm going to be cool. Like everything's going to be good and I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be really good at being a mom. And it totally rocked my world, and had like the first year postpartum was so rough, like one of the worst years of my life. I was really depressed, really anxious, and had a lot of shame around it because I'm a therapist and thought like I should be able to manage this or something. Or that like I should have known better, or just something along those lines. I don't even know exactly what I was thinking, but I just had a bunch of shame around it. And so it took me a while to even recognize what was going on for me. And eventually when I never got counseling actually at that time, but got better support, was able to talk with people about it in my life and who I cared about, and finally sort of found my way out of that. And then realized like, this is what I want to do. I want to help women or couples who are experiencing any one of these things that I've gone through, that my husband and I have gone through, and help them to have better resources, have a better understanding of what to expect, have just a better experience, hopefully, than what I had.
Yeah, because like you said, it's a specialty, right? So it's not common.
It's not. Yeah, it's not commonly taught in graduate programs. You really have to go out of your way to get specialized training in perinatal mental health. It is a growing area, but I teach a lot of continuing education courses on this. And so continuing education is primarily counselors who they're already licensed, and we have to get continuing education, a certain number of units of continuing education every 2 years so that we can renew our license. So I'm teaching people who are already licensed at this point. And every time I teach one of these courses, I ask in the beginning, how many of you learned about this in graduate school? And it's almost always nobody.
Really?
Nobody.
I would figure that like a marriage family therapist would have some sort of idea,
You'd
or
think.
taking a little bit of courses as they've received their whatever it is that their degree or whatever in their field, but nothing at all.
Yeah, nothing at all.
Really?
And again, it is changing, but not a lot. Like I graduated with my master's degree in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And I had hoped that by now there would have been a significant change. Like I learned maybe 15 minutes about this in my entire graduate program.
Really?
I thought by now there may have been some significant change. And at this point there is, it's almost none. Luckily, where I'm teaching now, they are allowing for about 2 hours during a lifespan development course of learning about perinatal mental health, which is tremendous. Like that's 2 hours is way more than 15 minutes. And there's a lot that you can learn in that time to at least get a framework for what you might be dealing with if you meet with a client who's going through one of these things.
Yeah. And now that you mention it, I looked it up on YouTube, perinatal mental health, and I couldn't find a ton of videos. There were some good TED Talks that I listened to. But just like this lady on one of the TED Talks explained, it's kind of taboo, what women have to go through on the postpartum side.
Right.
And I don't, why is that? I don't understand why that wouldn't be something discussed more if it is affecting, I think she said 1 out of every 1,000 people, which I don't know if that statistic holds, but I mean, that's still, people are being affected by it. And the way she described her postpartum depression, it was scary. I mean, she talked about wanting to kill her kids and wanting to kill herself and not wanting to get out of bed, and the depression. And I mean, we see that we talk about mental health a lot. Why aren't we talking about women that are dealing with postpartum depression more often?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that statistic and those symptoms in particular are postpartum psychosis.
Okay.
And that's the one that is sort of like the big scary one that people often talk about. You hear about in the news. We actually had a woman very recently in Independence who lost her life in a psychotic episode, and I don't know exactly what happened, but she was killed by police in the midst of a psychotic episode. And so this was, I mean, I want to say it was a couple weeks ago even that this happened. And so these are the things we hear about in the news, and so they tend to feel very, very scary because they're so sensationalized. But there are a lot of women who experience postpartum psychosis who are, well, I shouldn't say it that way. A lot are overlooked. Quite a bit are overlooked, actually. What I'm trying to say is that it's actually very treatable. And so postpartum psychosis is one of the few perinatal mental health disorders that really needs to be treated by medication. Some others can be, but don't necessarily have to be. But
there's a holistic approach to it too.
There can be, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Of course, it's never universal with anything, but yeah.
Right, right. But with psychosis, it's like, yes, we need an antipsychotic medication, but it's so treatable, and women absolutely recover when they're treated well for it.
The problem is, though, is when they go to these doctors, like I've heard these stories, and they just kind of brush it off. I'm sure not every doctor does. And she explained that she had to go back, and then she finally got a doctor that took an extra 10 minutes to talk with her, and he determined that she has a postpartum depression. He was able to treat her. But some of them, they either don't know, or they're just in that mode of it's just a job. Just next one. So.
Well, that is part of the issue. Well, I do also want to point out, so perinatal mental health disorders affect about 1 in 5 women, actually, in the United States or in just westernized cultures in general. And so about 20% are experiencing one of the disorders. And
what are the disorders? If you could just name a couple
yeah,
of them.
So it's postpartum depression, perinatal. So it can happen in pregnancy or postpartum. So perinatal depression, perinatal anxiety, OCD, PTSD. Why am I blanking? There is perinatal bipolar. ADHD can sometimes show up after having a baby.
So pretty much like these are things that normal people also, wrong word.
The average person, they don't have to have a baby.
Yeah, they don't have to have a baby in order to have these symptoms, but this just goes with during pregnancy, right?
During pregnancy or postpartum.
Before or after. Okay.
Yeah, and there are really specific symptoms that come up that are related to being pregnant or postpartum that you have to really understand to treat somebody well who is experiencing one of these disorders. And so, that's 20% of women who are experiencing those things. And that's what's reported. It's probably more than that.
Oh, yeah. Think about how many women who don't. They just power through it.
Yeah.
I know some. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They call it the baby blues as if it's just normal.
Right. And that,
and I'm at guilt of it too. I had no idea what it was. You know what I mean? I it's like you said, it's not something even discussed at the level of professionals in colleges, you know, as much as it should be, let alone your normal average Joe who, is just being told by a woman, oh, I know I feel these baby blues. So it's like, well, okay, well, we all get down, we'll be all right. We'll power through it. But there's more to it than that I just didn't know myself. And I'm sure a lot of people don't know.
A lot of people don't. Yeah. And there's a whole lot of like patting mom on the back and saying, you'll be okay, or you're going to get through it. And that's about it. And that's, just like you were talking about with doctors, I hate to say that because, again, I don't want to put people down. There are doctors who are wonderful and really want to be helpful and do their best. And there are so many who are minimizing the symptoms that moms are experiencing or women are experiencing, and sort of giving them that pat on the back and saying, don't worry, you'll be fine. Just don't stress about it. Right. And these women are in the depths of despair, and don't necessarily know how to express it, and are maybe being having the opportunity to say something to their OBGYN at maybe their 6-week postpartum checkup that lasts 5 minutes. And so we just really, really lack the support needed for moms in our country. Yeah,
no, I totally get it. Is this something also probably around the world they're dealing with as well? I'm guessing. Yeah.
It's a worldwide issue.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. What are some of the symptoms? Like, what are women going through when they're dealing with postpartum depression? And then if we could also discuss maybe the approaches to treatment and what is out there that could help them through that.
Yeah. So if we talk about postpartum depression specifically, there are challenges like not feeling attached to the baby, not sleeping well or sleeping too much, lacking motivation, not finding interest in pleasurable things things you would normally enjoy, like going out for a walk or spending time with friends, not being interested in those things, just a general sense of hopelessness, sometimes suicidality, and isolation.
And is that just from what they're going through when because you said it can happen during pregnancy as well, right? Because my thought was after pregnancy, it's a whole shock to your body to deliver a baby. I'm sure the hormone imbalances you have to deal with and all sorts of stuff. But during, like what is going on there as well? Like, why is that happening during? Because you would think you're dealing with a lot of, I'm sure, uncomfortableness. I'm sure there's a lot of other things during pregnancy you're dealing with, but it's supposed to be a time of bonding with your child. So what happens when people are dealing with that during as well?
Yeah. Well, those massive hormonal changes are happening during
Right.
pregnancy as well.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's so much emotionally that happens during that time too. Like your body is changing so rapidly and you have no control over it.
Right.
A lot of times women will feel really ill or very tired. It can be hard to say care for yourself. And if you have other children or doing work,
I
you
think
know,
about, you've got
all of
everything.
these normal duties you still have and you feel terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to have that sort of bonding experience with your baby when you feel like garbage, you know?
For sure.
And so,
but there's times where there's good times, right? Like there's always that talk of that aura stage where they kind of have that glow, that pregnancy glow. And, you know, I've never been pregnant, so I can't really, this is what I've heard.
Yeah.
But I would hope to think there are moments during pregnancy that, you know, are good as well. You know what I mean? To be able to feel life inside of you and be able to connect with your child.
It's super cool.
Yeah, it's got to be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all of it. You know, for some women, there is nothing enjoyable, unfortunately, in pregnancy. And for others, they absolutely love being pregnant. And for a lot of women, it's somewhere in between.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, it's just such a massive change in life. Like it's such a huge
and everybody's different.
event.
They take things differently. Yeah.
I mean, and you're growing a whole human. And like I said, our culture is just not great at supporting moms. And so that's another huge piece of it is we don't know how to feed pregnant moms well. So that they're really well nourished. Same thing with postpartum. We don't know how to generally support pregnant or postpartum women with maybe extra help they might need in various areas or emotionally. There's a huge expectation of this is supposed to be good. You're supposed to enjoy this time. Right. And so there's a ton of shame when women don't enjoy it or even just have parts of it they don't enjoy. Like I was...
Community too, probably.
Oh, community is huge. And being able to be honest about those things with others and not feel bad about it.
Right.
But I was really sick with my first for the entire first half of pregnancy. But most of what I was hearing from people, because I had come off of 9 years of infertility, was... aren't you so happy? Isn't this amazing? And it was like, yeah, I'm so happy to be having a baby, but I feel like trash. And so it was just that shame cycle of like, oh, well, I'm obviously there's something wrong with me because I'm supposed to just be happy during this time.
You know what? But you said something that kind of spoke to me, the food wise too. I never thought about that because, you know, when you're pregnant, you want to give her whatever she wants. You know, she's craving all sorts of different things. But you're right. Like if we're craving a lot of bad food and, you know, you're taking all that in, you're not taking in, you know, healthier food, that's also probably going to contribute negatively as well.
To mental health, absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, that's just for anybody regardless. If you're eating just very bad food over a long time span, which 9 months is a long time, you know, you're gonna be dealing with that as well, and that you don't need to add more to whatever you're going through already.
Right,
so,
right, yeah, and we make a lot of jokes about like the cravings that women have, and I mean it's so real. Like I remember wanting
pickle
to
juice
eat.
And stuff.
Yeah, well, I remember like. I generally eat really healthy, and I remember wanting top ramen so bad, like the packaged top ramen, you know, and it's ramen. Just like that, but that's so like outside of my norm, or like boxed macaroni and cheese. But we, you know, during and it's not bad. Like you can totally have some of that stuff,
moderation,
but like on a regular basis, women need really nutrient dense food when they're pregnant to feed themselves, to feed their babies, and to feed their brains. Like their mineral stores are being reduced because baby is using all of that if they're not replacing it well. And that impacts just how you feel all around.
For sure. What are some of the early warning signs of somebody kind of starting to go into that pre or post, like when they should start to go maybe speak to somebody, because we all deal with life, right? And we've had discussions on the show about mental health and how many people, it's hard to determine who needs it and who's just kind of complaining about life. And so how do you know when you're like, okay, I'm not only dealing with life, this is something completely different. Like I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to a health professional on what it is and the next steps so we don't let this get out of control.
Yeah, I think when it comes to perinatal mental health specifically, if a woman is having a difficult time seeing any good in her situation, in the idea that she's having a baby or has a baby, when she's feeling helpless or hopeless, expressing things like, I'm not sure I can do this. And it's not a one-off. Like we all have those moments of, man, this is a big deal. I'm not sure I can do this. But if there's like a consistent pattern of, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can handle
over
this.
a certain period of time where it's not you've never felt like that before. This isn't normal.
Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of crying maybe. And again, like this is a time where probably mom's going to be crying a little bit more than normal because it's a really emotional time. But if it's like, every day we're crying, every day can't get out of bed, every day I don't think I can do this, then we probably need to chat with somebody.
Yeah. And then also too, I think a big one is to the support system of those women, being husbands or family or whatever. Like what are things, advice you could give to them? Because like I said earlier, I had no idea. I was one of those that was clueless to it, and I didn't know, I didn't understand, I didn't get it, because it's something not really discussed.
Yeah.
So what could there be something that though the support system can be better on to help them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's really help with household duties, help with baby, help with ask, how are you doing? So many times, once baby comes, nobody's asking how mom's doing anymore. Everybody's asking, how's the baby?
Right.
How's the baby sleeping? How are they pooping? Like all those kinds of things, rather than how are you feeling? Asking her regularly how she's feeling. What does she need? We have this this culture of self-sufficiency that has helped us in a lot of ways in America, but it doesn't help us in this time. Like we need community, and a lot of times moms aren't even going to recognize that. They're going to think I should be able to do all this stuff, but no, like other people need to be cooking and cleaning and taking care of all of the other things so mom can just recover and bond with baby like she's supposed to be.
And overall too, I would say, even not while your significant other is pregnant, just overall, you should be sharing duties, and depending on how you have your life set up, whatever works for you. But if both you guys are working and both you guys are, like help each other out. And that's something I've had to learn growing up too. I was not a saint at all when I was a younger man, but these are things, communication and listening, and especially from a man's point of view, is just bringing your ego and your humbleness down, or being more humble, but bringing that ego down, and understanding it's like you can't just go with this I work and that's all I need to do type shit. Like you got to help out. You're going to run her into the ground, and then you're going to wonder why she's not talking to you, and the connection's not there anymore, and all that stuff. So for sure.
Yeah. A lot of that does still, even with equal work, a lot of that stuff does still fall on women in relationships. And we got to do something about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Also too, you said what else went with this again? You said also the infertility. So that's one of them as well, that a lot of people I hear deal with as well, which is I've known some people that are dealing with that, and it's a huge there's not much you can really do There's like, what's that called? In vitro or something?
Oh, in vitro fertilization.
Yeah, like stuff like that.
IVF, yeah.
But even the success rate on that is very...
It's less than half.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
and it's like a $10,000 to $20,000 procedure.
Yeah, very expensive.
And it's less than half success rate. Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the things that you can kind of describe on that side, that people going through that?
Oh, gosh. Because
I know you went through it personally. I know Michael came on and discussed a little bit about it.
Yeah. That one is... that's one that we call disenfranchised grief. Mm-hmm. So it's a type of grief that isn't widely recognized. People don't know how to support people who are going through it. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very, very lonely experience. And what the cycle that couples are going through, and especially the woman, just being the person in the body that would or would not be getting pregnant, is that there's this monthly cycle of grief happening. So there's this like hope building up to ovulation, and okay, maybe we're going to get pregnant this time. And then we try, maybe we're excited about that. But then there's this anxiety leading up to whether or not I'm going to find out that I'm pregnant. Mm-hmm. And then there's this devastation of finding out you're not. Mm-hmm. And you go through this every month, every single month, and just constant awareness of like, again, I'm in this body knowing that this body is not pregnant. And then there's all the stuff of other people getting pregnant and other people having babies, right, and wanting to be there for them and be happy for them. And at the same time, just feeling this sense of injustice of like, well, this is so unfair that these people all get to have babies and it seems so easy when, I mean, that's not realistic either, but that's how it feels when you're in that space of like, oh, look how easy it is for everybody else. And it's so hard for us. And it just seems unfair.
Yeah. What is that for a woman when, like, what are you going through when you're seeing others and they're able to have a child and you're stuck there trying and it's just not working? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is that feeling of having to go through that?
There's so much envy, which then feels really crappy. Like I hated feeling envious of other people at that time. There's a lot of, shame again, that feeling like there's something wrong with me.
Like it doesn't make you feel like you're like a woman because you can't give birth. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which was a thing that I don't think I ever thought about before that time. Like I would never look at another woman and say, oh, she doesn't have children, she's not a woman. Yeah. But that was definitely something that came up for me.
For sure. Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
And then also too, people that have to deal with miscarriages, I'm guessing that's also something
part of our story too.
Very devastating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've heard stories from people that are close that have had to go through that, other people as well. And I can't imagine like what a woman has to go through to be able to know she's pregnant, everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden it just, yeah. I mean, it's horrible.
It's devastating. For some, I will say, like the experience varies. For some, really? It feels like it's not necessarily a big deal. Mm-hmm. For most, it's much more devastating than they ever imagined. Mm-hmm. And you think about it, like it's the only death that happens inside your body.
Right.
Like you have deaths that you know somebody and you've got this way, we can grieve a person we knew. Like I've got pictures with this person, or we have memories with this person. And so we can talk about them and remember them together. With a baby lived inside your body and that's all you have, is like, how do I grieve this? Like, right.
It's a different connection.
It's so different. Yeah. And it's hard to explain to people.
I wonder though if the ones who have to deal, what's it called when they have to give birth?
Stillbirth.
Stillbirth. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's a totally different, because you're actually seeing giving birth to the baby and then having to deal with all those emotions because you're actually seeing. Mm-hmm. Because what happens during, and I know I'm totally naive right now. I'm kind of embarrassed about this, but like for a miscarriage that's not, what'd you call it for the stillborn?
Stillbirth?
Yeah, stillbirth. Mm-hmm. So just a normal miscarriage. How is that? Like it just all of a sudden
Yeah, it
Like
kind of
it's
varies.
okay.
So there are lots of different kinds of loss. If it was just the miscarriage, like the one you're kind of describing, yes, basically like the body expels the baby
Okay.
and all of the material that was
Right.
there, and
So
it can
still
actually
can
feel
be,
kind of like birth.
so it still can be pretty
It can be,
gruesome and
yeah.
so I'm sure that's definitely going to play, very difficult on someone's mental health and having to undergo that for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I've definitely worked with women who have had traumatic miscarriage experiences, and it's something that they.
Sorry, my furnace is about to turn
Oh
on.
no,
I'm going
that's
to turn
all
it down.
right.
I'm all over the place today.
No problem at all.
But I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, I've definitely worked with women who've had traumatic miscarriage experiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, and then also too, the parenthood as well is something I've seen. So you also, that falls under what you do as well on counseling wise.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't go too far into like parent coaching. We don't go that far into it, but I'm working more with women on just kind of the experience of parenthood and where they're struggling. Again, we've just, where I've ended up starting this podcast, Motherhood in America, is part of this struggle that moms in America experience, that we think we have to be all things for our children and like do everything perfectly. And honestly, I'm working with moms a lot on that, of like letting go of that desire to do everything perfectly and basically like create perfect children. Like that's not going to be a thing.
That's something I can relate to too, because I'm very critical on my parenting. I was a very young parent, so I've made a lot of mistakes. My oldest grew up with me. I was a kid. I was 18 when I had my first child. And I mean, I have like torn myself up like to tears, like crying about this, about not being better, not regrets of like, I could have been a better father. I could have approached things differently. Like, ways I parented that I don't agree with, as I've gotten older, things that may have been passed down from generation to generation, you know what I mean? Like that type of stuff. So I completely understand that side of it. And it took a while for me to get out of my head and just go, Gabriel, like, you're not a horrible father. No one's perfect. You got to move forward, because you're stuck in this weird zone of like, you're never going to grow. Like, you're just constantly thinking about the past and about how you're trying to perfect, like wishing you could go back to perfect things. Yeah. And it's just not real. Everybody probably wishes they could do that. And it's just not real.
I wish I could change the way I have handled things today with my kids.
Right. Yeah. Because even to this day, it's like, sometimes you may have a lot going on and you may snap a little bit and be like, damn, like, did they really deserve that? Like, I'm dealing with other stuff. It's not really them. Yeah, I heard dad 30 times, or she heard mom 30 times. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like but to let that go, it's difficult, and I've heard it from other people as well. It's difficult to get out of your head and just be happy with what you're doing now for them and enjoy it, instead of always trying to do more and more and more. Yeah,
I think we are probably like this generation of parents have put more pressure on ourselves than any past generation. Like,
do you think that's a good and a bad though?
I do think, yes. Yeah. I think there are absolutely good things that have come from it. Like, we have more information. We know better, like what's better tools, for children's mental health, like better ways to support them. Better ways to support ourselves in parenting. Those are all good things. And at the same time, I think having so much access to information has made us just like hyper focused on trying to do it all right.
You said social media?
I didn't say social media, but you're right.
What would you say?
I
I'm
said
sorry.
just having access to so much information.
Oh, so much information.
Yeah,
Okay,
which, yes, so much of that is social media.
Social media too, because that's one thing I was thinking about, because you're seeing it's social media is just a highlight reel for everybody, which I get. Nobody wants to put their dirty laundry out there,
Sure,
so I totally get that. But sometimes, and even myself, I forget, and I'm like, holy shit, man, they've got it figured out.
Yeah.
But then you got to go, well, hold on. They put their pants on the same way I do in the morning. So I'm sure they're dealing with some shit as well. So to kind of be conscious of that and kind of reel yourself back so you don't overanalyze what you're doing. Yeah, that definitely could be difficult. And I could see how social media it plays on everything. And I'm not here to bash social media.
Sure.
I use it. I think it's a great tool. But I also can see the negative sides of it as well. And we definitely got to be cautious of that for sure.
Yeah. We just have to be more aware and spend less time on it. Like, that's the big thing is that even most of us have that awareness. Like you just said, you can look at somebody else and be like, oh yeah, they say they put their pants on the same way I do. Yeah. Like you can think that, but when you're spending a lot of time on social media, you're still getting overwhelmed by all this messaging.
Right.
Like we really just need to spend less time and energy on it so that we're out in the real world more often and just dealing with the day-to-day stuff rather than comparing it to other people.
Yeah, I know. That's a big thing, is like everything's just online now. I was listening to that TED Talk and her even saying, like, community-wise, like how many times do we find excuses not to go hang out with friends? Like for her, like what she explained, her being a mother, and sometimes when you're going through pregnancy and maybe your friends are not, you kind of lose touch because they're not in the same lane as you right now. You're going down a different path, and so you have that disconnect. And then all you really have is that phone, and you're looking at stuff on there, and you're not actually getting out there and pushing yourself, instead of going, well, I don't know, I don't really want to drive to blah, blah, blah and hang out and I'm just so tired. But you should kind of push yourself. That way you can have that community and have that interaction, because it's uplifting. Yeah.
Yeah. And like COVID super messed us up around that.
I know.
People got so used to being home that now there are a lot of people who are just accustomed to like, I just hang out at my house and like do stuff online.
Right.
And because everything became so convenient and so easy to do that, we're totally missing out on connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could go on and on about that one.
Oh, I know. And I think also if you utilize social media in a very constructive way, there's plenty of communities out there. You can find, like, I'm sure there's a community for people that are going through exactly what you counsel people
totally.
for, that you can have that community and build that community, maybe find some people in your area that you can meet up with and talk and do all that. Because I think people underestimate the power of conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it just releases so much. You're venting, also be constructive about it too. Like, hopefully you have good friends around you that's going to give you good rational advice, and helpful advice. But even just speaking itself, like, it just feels good to let it out instead of just sitting there in your mind and just dealing with it on your own.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And like to hear yourself say things out loud makes a difference. Like you have stuff just rolling around in your head all day, not saying it out loud to anybody. When you finally say it out loud to somebody, and it's like, oh, maybe I don't really believe that. Like that in and of itself is helpful, talking to people.
So I think did we already cover everything? I think right now I feel like we went through that, didn't we?
I don't know.
Because I have written down postpartum, infertility, loss and parenthood. Yeah, we pretty much covered it all. Let's talk about your podcast.
Yeah, sure.
So you started your podcast back up. You've got that going. It's great.
Thank you.
I've listened to what's the one I just listened to today with the doctor, the guy.
Dr. Lee Baucom.
Yeah.
Save the Marriage.
Yeah. So it's pretty neat. So is that what you're geared towards, or you're just sticking to kind of that your field of work? I know it's not necessarily your exact field, but it's kind of branches of what you do.
Yeah. So what's out there so far are my legacy episodes from when I did the Holistic Fertility and Wellness podcast. So that's all I started 2016. And I went for a couple of years there with that. And so I'm re-releasing those. And a lot of them are like fertility-based or loss-based interviews. And what I'm moving into now is I finally recorded my first video episode, like brand new episode that'll be releasing next week, is I'm going to start talking more specifically about the experience of motherhood in America. So the episode I recorded last week is about breastfeeding in America, which is a whole big thing. Just sort of how it that is sort of taboo and people get really weird about it, and maybe how it's changed over time. So we talk about that. No,
that's funny that you said that, because I remember when I was younger and I seen an individual just breastfeeding plain as day in a restaurant. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, why doesn't she like, you know, go somewhere else to do? I was so naive about it.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I was young, but, and then when I got older, I'm like, what are you talking about? It's a boob, man. It's natural. She's feeding her kid. Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you want her to go in the bathroom, you know, where it stinks and shit? Like, you don't want that. And so, yeah, you're right. It's why I wonder why that is. Why is that taboo? It's just not talked about, I guess.
Well, I mean, and
I guess a lot of people feed their kid formula, you know, so
that's part of it. Yeah, that's part of it. Is formula was really well marketed in the 70s and the 80s. And so breastfeeding rates really dropped during that time. And they actually marketed it like this is the healthier alternative to breast milk.
So you look at the ingredients.
So, of those. So that's sort of a lingering thought that a lot of people have, like, why would you breastfeed when you can give formula? And again, like, no shade to anybody who does formula. That can be very helpful for a lot of people. But we also just have this like serious problem with over-sexualizing women. And so rather than seeing it as a woman feeding her baby, people have a hard time because they see it as a sexual thing. When it's like,
so put it away. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, definitely. But I think you're right. I think it's becoming more common now. I feel like you said, there's a lot more videos and stuff like that out there that are kind of explaining things so that way people can understand. And I think women are more now standing up and also saying like, hey, I'm not going to fucking leave and go somewhere else to do this. Like, this is my kid. I'll feed my kid, you know? So, for sure. And I think they sell a lot of different things that are helping them out now too. They're not having to throw a blanket. They actually have like special things. That way they can have privacy as well. So, I mean, you don't want the old creepy dude staring at you while you're feeding your baby. So I think advancements like that are definitely helping out as well.
Yeah.
So
and just really having the choice, like, if you want to be private, great. Like, that there are ways to be private. And even if it doesn't bother you, like, there shouldn't be pressure to hide either.
For sure. Yeah. I don't think so as well. And talk about it. You know what I mean? Like this podcast right here, hopefully somebody sees it, men, women, whoever are having issues with it, and they see it's not really a big deal. You know, I mean, if anything, you should be very proud, because that's tough. I mean,
it's hard work.
Yeah. Trying to breastfeed a child. I've seen it. It doesn't look all fun all the time. But I have heard that they miss it, though, afterwards.
Yes.
It's kind of like a weird, it's like, oh, God, it's annoying. But then it's like, once it's done, it's like, oh, I miss it.
Oh, I miss it, yeah.
It's really good for the baby, too. So that's another thing. But, what else do you have coming up?
I've got an interview scheduled with a friend of mine who wrote a book on postpartum mental health. It's called A Mom is Born. And she and I met just right after she released that book. And I learned about it. So, like, as a Christian myself, I have looked for resources that are related to perinatal mental health and also Christian based. And like, they just don't meet anywhere. There's like mom books for like encouragement for moms. Right. Or there's just straight like secular perinatal stuff that doesn't necessarily align the values all the time. Yeah. And so she wrote this book as a therapist on postpartum mental health and as a Christian. And I was like, I have to meet this person. So I immediately messaged her on Instagram and she responded to me. And now we're friends and it's been really cool. And so I'm excited to interview her. And then I also have an interview coming up on the racial disparity in maternal mental health as well from the leader of Kansas Birth Equity Network.
I want to get to that one. But to go back on the Christianity, why do you think that is that there's that break in that? Like there's not enough out there.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stigma in the Christian world around religion counseling overall, and mental health in general. And it's just really in the last maybe decade that there's this more openness
and I've heard a spike also in people actually becoming religious.
Yeah.
So at least that's what statistics say, which you never know when it comes to
that's true.
with stats. But I mean, I feel like I see it. You know, I have a brother who's really religious, and I see him and a lot of his friends that are, you know, kind of following that trend as well. And I don't know why there's a bad stigma. I've gone through my phases in life where I've been that guy that's kind of talked shit about people who are religious, so I totally get it. But now that I'm older, I feel like, why were you doing that? Like, if it helps them, why do you care?
Yeah.
And in the end, you went to that side anyway. So like, what was that all for? I don't understand why people bash people that find something that helps them navigate through life, you know, and gives them hope and gives them purpose and meaning. And I don't know why that people do that.
Yeah. But people, I think, bash things that make them uncomfortable.
True.
You know, so if it makes them start to reflect on some of their own stuff and they don't like that, like, then they'll usually put it down. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, it's weird. It's very weird. And then you said, I also like too on, it's Hopeful and Whole Counseling, right?
Yeah,
that's yours.
That's my
your business.
private practice.
Okay. I like how I think it's cool that you add it as an option. So you're kind of, you're meeting both. It's like, you don't necessarily have to be a Christian, but if you're interested, it's an option.
Right.
You know, I think that's really neat that you offer that as an option and not just as a Christian-based counseling, you know, practice.
For sure. Like, I want to help whoever would like help. And they don't have to share my faith in order for me to be helpful to them.
Yeah. And it's cool that you're able to come out, because a lot of people would keep that private. You know,
and I did for a long time.
Yeah. And it's really, and I'm starting to see that trend in a lot of businesses where they're like, this is who I am. I'm going to be who I am. The people that want to, you know, come to me for whatever they need, they're going to come to me for me. I don't want to hide anything about myself. Exactly. And I think that's very, very real, you know, for people to do that. And also too, what do you think from the Christian perspective, what do you feel that gives that individual that, you know, like how do you feel that helps for them?
Yeah, I think having a stable foundation. So knowing that, like, if I can believe there is a loving God who cares deeply about me and has good plans for my life, then I don't always have to know what they are or exactly how they're going to play out to have some hope.
Right.
You know, I also realize in that space, then I don't have to be perfect. Like, it's not all up to me to figure everything out. Like, if God's got control of it, I obviously have to take responsibility for myself, but it's not up to me to orchestrate all the things in my life and make sure everything's going to be okay.
You can also let go of some of those things. What do they say? Let go and let God. So yeah, I can understand how that could help out a lot.
It's
for sure.
So much freedom in that.
I know. And then sometimes I think back to, like, I tried to call myself an atheist at one point, but I felt like, and I'm not going to speak for all atheists, but I feel like I was more in a bitter stage of my life. And some of the atheists that I hear on podcasts, and I listen to them and I hear them, and it's hard to judge because I'm listening to a podcast or an interview on YouTube, but they just seem so bitter and condescending about, you know, like it's just all about being right. Like, I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of made me turn that leaf of like, hey, just let people do what they want if it helps them. And then in the end, when I started thinking like, why don't you look at some of these things? And maybe I don't particularly have a certain denomination that I am aligned to,
Mm-hmm.
but that whole believing that there is a higher power and that there's, hopefully something after death. And that's really helped me out as well. And I see why a lot of people gravitate to that. I haven't been on the level of some individuals I've heard where they can just explain how it has completely changed their life. And maybe because I haven't fully immersed myself into it, maybe that's something I need to look at. But I do feel the, how do I describe it? Almost like a peaceful feeling, of just like,
yeah.
Okay, like I can like I don't have to have all this on top of me, Gabriel. Like sometimes you just need to let life be. You're doing great. You're not just sitting here waiting for God to change your life. Like you said, you still have to go out there and take care of yourself and, work and do all these things and take care of your family and take care of yourself. But at the same time, sometimes you're doing all these things and you still have that, on your mind. And it's just like, okay, well, I need something, because if Wes was on the podcast, I can't remember what episode, but he told me something that I'll never forget. He said, if you don't worship something higher than you'll worship the next best thing. And I might have butchered that. But what he meant was, if you don't have something almost out of reach to worship and to kind of give your life to, you're going to worship money, drugs, women, men, whatever it is, like things that, may not be, especially when you obsess about it, it could be unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And I never thought of it like that. And he's right. If you don't have something higher than you to be able to give your life to, you could possibly fall to other things that could negatively impact your life.
Totally. And all those things are going to fail you at some point,
right.
None of those things are ever going to fully satisfy. And so many of us are just looking for identity. Like we want to know that we matter.
Oh, it's a big thing.
You find it, try and find it anyway. And all those things you just listed. Mm-hmm. And like any one of those things, like the rug's going to get pulled out from under you at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also you said with the racial inequality, you said as well, I heard you talk about, I can't remember if it was a clip I had seen, but that minorities were going through, they go through certain things during pregnancy at the hospital sometimes, maybe possibly neglect or stuff like that. I don't know if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah. So maternal health in general for minorities is worse. So maternal health outcomes, things like maternal mortality, women who die after childbirth, the things like gestational diabetes or hypertension, SIDS, so sudden infant death syndrome for the babies, like it's higher for minorities. And there are a lot of reasons that play into that. But when I'm looking at mental health, there is, like I'd mentioned, perinatal mental health is going to affect about 20% of women in general. Mm-hmm. Well, that means that's throwing all the women into one bucket and looking at the average. But if we look specifically at Black moms and Indigenous American moms, they're at the highest rate. And they're experiencing perinatal mental health disorders at 50%. That's half of them.
Why do you think that is?
It's racism. It's neglect. It's less access. It's taboo in certain cultures to seek support.
Right.
It's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I didn't think about the culture thing as well. Yeah. Different cultures are to go about things differently, for sure. And is that here in the United States or is that worldwide, that stat?
I do my best just to speak specifically about the U.S. because I don't know as much about what's happening worldwide.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, that's wild. I just 50%. That's 50%. A lot. 50%. Yeah, that's a lot.
And they're also less likely, like I said, they're less likely to seek help. So they're more likely to experience a mental health crisis, and they're less likely to seek help.
Yeah, and it's just that's wild. I guess I never really thought about that. I mean, I guess it's happens, racism's out there. We all know that it's going to happen. But yeah, it's definitely other things too, culture. I'm sure I'm sure there's other things as well that play a part into it, that, could possibly, create that outcome. But
yeah, well, I'll tell you, just think it very basically that we tend to want to receive support from people who are somewhat similar to us. It's pretty easy for me to go look for a therapist who looks like me. But if a Black mom is struggling and she just wants to have somebody to talk to who might understand a bit about her experience, her culture, she's going to have a really hard time actually finding a Black perinatal mental health therapist. In fact, I know of one in the Kansas City metro.
Right. Really? Yeah, that's hard for me because I come from a mixed household, so I don't really identify. I talk to a lot of people who are mixed, and it's hard for us to have that because we're not really on either side. So I don't really, I guess I could understand it for people. I get it. But to me, I try to just go to people who are wanting to help regardless. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes people kind of play into it a little too much. You don't always, I feel like, necessarily have to have an individual that looks like you in order to understand you. There's plenty of great people out there that can help you that maybe aren't the color of your skin, but I just think sometimes we think about that too much. Now, culture-wise, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Like if you're from a different country or a different, the way you go about stuff, I understand. But I mean, United States-wise, we're all kind of a little similar. At least I feel like I've interviewed a lot of people, and we have a lot more common than what we think. You know, this is kind of the beauty about this podcast is I've had a wide array of people, and just to hear stories that are like, oh yeah, I went through that too, or like, just the common similarities in life. And it's kind of amazing sometimes because I know we think we're so different, but we're really not.
Yeah. And I
at least United States wise.
Right. And I definitely agree with that. Like we can all find more similarities than differences if we really get down to it.
Right.
And I think for these women especially, because their community, like the Black community, does still experience a significant amount of racism. And I'm sort of middle of the road on this, but I've listened to people's experiences a lot,
Yeah, and that's all you can really go off of.
Yeah, and when they're saying like it would mean something to them to be able to chat with somebody who understands a bit about Black culture. And I've had Black friends my whole life. Like I'm not totally oblivious to Black culture, but also I'm not Black. Like I've never been Black, and that it would mean something to them. And so I take them on their word on that,
for sure.
And
if that's what you want, I don't care. You know what I mean? My more thing is I just feel like in today's age, I don't know, people just like everyone is always about like color of the skin, and it's like people, can we look at each other as a human being? Like I don't look at somebody and I notice you're Black or you're Mexican or you're white or what Asian, but I don't care. You know what I mean? But at the same time, if you're trying to seek help, go seek help to wherever you want, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I just kind of wish in today's age we'd kind of turn that leaf over and just kind of come together as human beings and help one another regardless of, what we look like. And, racism's a hard thing to kind of weed out. You can't really fight it. You can't really change it. The only thing you can do is kind of, I think the change happens from learning, and you can't force an individual to learn. You kind of just have to hope people come around, kind of like the Daryl Davis approach. And when he spoke on Joe Rogan talking about how he's like, I never really tried to argue with them about it. I more of just try to show them I'm not what they think I am. So I think that's probably the best approach to it, at least.
Yeah. It's like modeling to other people. It's like
instead of fighting.
Exactly. Exactly. Just,
and it could be hard. You know what I mean? Like, you get called certain names, or somebody acts weird or makes a comment to you. I'm sure it's got to be hard, but we got to remember that you can't. That's a sticky situation, depending on how far it goes. I totally get it. Like if somebody came up to my daughter and said some crazy shit, it'd be different. You know what I mean? Like I totally understand that. But at some point, like to me, I look white, and I am white, but I'm also half Mexican as well.
Me too.
A lot of people don't. Oh, really?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that about me. So when I'm around people, I hear a lot of comments made. And they forget that my last name's Garcia. They forget about my background, but I don't really get bothered by it. I more of just look at it as this guy's an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, and I just kind of whatever. And because I just know it's like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to, bash this guy and try to force him to? That's not going to work. He is who he is, and a lot of these people are, that I've seen are, the older people. It's like, you're going to teach old dog new tricks? More than likely, probably not. Yeah, probably so there's nothing you can do. I just don't fuck with them. I just go do my own thing. That's kind of how I approach it. But yeah,
it's always I mean, I definitely can relate to that. Also appearing white, but being just as Mexican as I am white.
Yeah. So is your mother or father Mexican?
My father.
Father. Okay. Same here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so it's like, it's a part of me.
And we
it's
have colored eyes.
Yes.
That's a big, and what's funny too is actually I never really I went through more, I hate using the word racism because I feel like it's a very watered down word in today's age, but I went through a lot of shit actually from the minority community growing up, because that's kind of where I grew up part of my life. Then I transitioned up north. And, but I mean, I've always, even the friends I had up here who were Mexican, it's like, I dealt with a lot of like white boy, gringo, weddle type stuff, and just the bashing. It's funny to see it happen on, every race does it to a point, and it's so weird.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I've been there too. I mean, we grew up in Southern California.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a huge Hispanic population. But nobody ever knew unless they were a friend of mine. Nobody ever knew just by looking at me. Atayde. Oh. Which is not even a very common
I've never heard that
Mexican name.
Yeah, I got Garcia. Yeah. I got the Johnson of Latino names. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I mean, it's a pretty rare name. There was like apparently an Atayde Brothers circus.
Oh, really?
That this is all I've ever heard of that name otherwise. So yeah, like I definitely went through that too, of like being called all the things and being assumed to be white.
Yeah, and then they find out you don't know Spanish, and it's, oh God, you're not Mexican, and then you're not dark enough, which is so weird. You know what's funny? I had a lady approach me, and I thought it was the weirdest thing. I was at my wife's work party, and this Mexican lady approached me. And she shook my hand. And this is how crazy, I'm fine with us discussing what happens to minority and the racism that happens to minorities. I think it's fine. We can discuss that. But I think some people forget also the other side too. And when I was standing next to her, she made the comment of, "Oh, this is your husband? Oh, I didn't think he looked like that." It's like,
oh gosh,
what, lady? What are you talking? Like, what are you talking about? Like, if I would have been black or if I would have been Mexican, like, would you have said that? Probably not. And it's and then, I don't get mad. I just kind of laughed and I go, "Oh, well, what does Mexican look like?"
Yeah.
And she was like, because she was like, this lady had the thickest accent. I think she might have been from, I don't know, but she was a Latina lady, and she said that, and I'm just like, man, that's very kind of ignorant of you to kind of say, because I've seen all different shades of Mexicans, from white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, to dark hair, dark skin, brown eyes,
Totally.
like there, and even in the black community. I mean, you've seen black guys who are really white with curly light hair, and you've seen really dark. So there's really no look to it. It actually just depends on kind of where your lineage came from.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, look at Canelo Alvarez, the boxer. I mean, he's red hair, freckles.
I wish I knew who that was, but I believe you.
Yeah. He's got literally red hair, really pale skin, and freckles. He looks Irish, so yeah, it's weird. But, I think that helped me though, as I grew up. And it's funny because it kind of pushed me to where I wanted, I don't know if you dealt with that when you were younger, where you wanted to be this race.
Very much so, yeah.
Oh my God. Like, I mean, to the point where I was like, thank God I didn't get in trouble in some of the shit I was doing. But it's like, when you're that young and they make you feel like that and that you want to prove, it's like, it's so weird. But when you get older, now that I look back, I'm like, what were you doing, Gabriel? That's so stupid. But, you kind of have to outgrow and shed that and just see it. But that helped me. And I'm kind of happy to be, I am happy to be from two different races, because I don't feel like I have that identity, like that identity is my life. It's just like whoever's cool. You know what I mean? I don't care.
Yeah.
Whoever's cool with me, I'm cool with them.
Exactly.
So,
yep. I totally get that.
Yeah. What else do you have coming up? Do you want to talk a little bit more about your business or anything? I don't know if there's anything I missed on that.
I don't know. Probably not. I don't know if I have a lot more to say on that. Yeah, I have a private practice where I primarily meet with perinatal mental health clients. That's definitely smaller now that I have this full-time job. But so like I've got a wait list. I'm not necessarily trying to bring more people in, but it's cool. I love being able to do it. And it's,
that's good though. It's starting to get popular to where people are wanting to seek help. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's incredible. I'm so grateful that I don't have to, I mean, there was a long time where I'm just like trying so hard to bring in clients. And at this point, it's not that anymore. And it's amazing. And it's been 8 years that I've been, building a private practice. And so it's really nice to. And
that's cool to know, at least in Kansas City, that it's becoming popular as well. Because I feel like sometimes the trends start on the coast and then they kind of come to the center of the United States. But
yeah.
Did you do, so you would have been here already, right? You weren't in California.
I
think Michael said 10 years?
We've been here, 10 years.
Okay. So you started your practice when you were here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had started a private practice in California and then we moved. So it was like 9 months of practice out there.
Gotcha.
And then we moved. And then when I got here, it took a little while to get my license here before I could start.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. Yeah. You had to get your license here as well because you can't. Are some states transferable, or every state you go to,
They're all different. It was so funny, actually. Like it's called reciprocity. So like if you have a license here, then you've got reciprocity in certain states, and then you can easily just transfer it over. Well, Kansas doesn't have reciprocity with California, but Missouri does. So I was able to get licensed in Missouri first, but Missouri and Kansas have reciprocity. So then I could get my license in Kansas. Oh my God. Like that doesn't even, it makes no sense.
Probably money.
Probably, sure.
That's what it always comes down to. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So in California though, you were doing something completely different?
I mean, I had just started private practice there. So like the process to become a independently licensed therapist is just very different in California. And so you have to like be employed somewhere and be working under a licensed therapist for a very long time before you can get your own license. And so I had been practicing, but not as a independently licensed therapist until like 9 months before we moved.
Really? Is this something that you kind of grew up wanting to do, or did you kind of just like, was it more towards later in life that you kind of decided?
It was really later. Like, I mean, not necessarily later. It was like after I graduated college, but I didn't know what I really wanted to do in college. I probably changed my major 3 or 4 times.
That's how I felt. They always asked me in high school, they're like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I have no idea. I don't even know what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Exactly.
Like, I have no idea.
Like, you might change it later. Like, I
still don't know. I'm 33 years old. I don't know what I want to do.
Well, and shouldn't it change? Like, do we really have to decide this is the thing I want to do for the rest of my life?
I don't know. It's so hard. It's so hard for people, I think, to figure out what direction they want to go to because, it's a risk, especially in right now with how, hard it is for people to be able to maintain a life off of a normal job, like financially. So it's hard to kind of take that leap, and then you kind of just get stuck into a job that pays decent. Well, it pays decent for a reason because it probably sucks. Not all the time, but some of the time. And you know, it's kind of hard to take that leap. But yeah, I mean, you're trying to figure that out at 18 years old, you know, right out of high school. I always felt like there's got to be another way around that, you know, because not everybody has the greatest, you know, maybe upbringing to where their parents are helping them, you know, in order to, you know, kind of show them different directions and work with them and stuff like that, you know, or even if they do, you know, the kid may just still not know. He just doesn't know yet. So, yeah, it's definitely a tough decision at 18 years old to decide where you want to go in life or where you're going to spend $60K on a college, you know, or however much it costs nowadays.
Totally. Yeah. And they start these kids so young now talking about what they want their college major to be. Like in 8th grade, they're expected to start figuring that out. And I just can't even imagine.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm dealing with my daughter right now. Like she's really into, I don't know what they're called, like a sonogram tech type thing. So she's looking at that stuff. She's for years been talking about that. And I'm like, well, you know, the beauty about having YouTube that I didn't have. I don't think YouTube came out until like 2009, I think. And I was almost out of high school. But like you can literally go on there and look at a day in the life of a sonogram tech.
Yeah.
See if you like it. I think that's so neat. Like you can literally find a job and like if you want to know, and granted, they're not all going to be like that, but you can at least get kind of a view of what it would be. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And you can pretty much learn anything you want or need to learn.
I know. On YouTube University. Yeah. It's pretty neat. People used to talk down on that for a while. Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah.
People are like, oh, you didn't see that on YouTube? Yeah, I did. Yeah. There's actually really smart people that upload videos on there.
I'm really proud of myself for remembering to do that and figuring it out.
Yeah. Also, too, if anybody wants to kind of get in this line of work, since it sounds like it's not like a huge, a bunch of them out there, like what are kind of the ways they can go about that, or, you know, kind of the path they need to take in order to become what you do?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So the organization that created the certification for it is called Postpartum Support International. And so they're a really great resource for lots of different training programs. And then if somebody wanted to get certified, then that would be the organization to do it through. And then there are others now who are just doing a lot of education around it. So you don't, in my opinion, you don't have to have a perinatal mental health certification to be able to serve this population. You just need to have some additional understanding about it. And so doing some additional education on it. So, you know, that could be through, I think it's the Nurturing Mamas Network is one. The Motherhood Center in New York, they have a really cool program there. And then they also have education online. And
are there any local?
There are, well, yeah, Sentimano Counseling. I don't know if they have any training right now, but off and on, they've been doing advanced trainings on perinatal mental health. And Mika Sentimano, she's the founder of Sentimano Counseling, and she was like the premier perinatal mental health therapist in Kansas City. She's been doing this work for over 20 years. And so she's like the go-to in our area for that.
That's neat. And then also, like, what are are there any podcasts or books? I know you mentioned one earlier, or any support groups that you may know of that maybe off the top of you, I'm sure it's kind of hard to remember all this stuff, but if any that you remember.
I mean, this is my life. I do remember, of course. Mom in Mind is a really great podcast for motherhood and mental health. Motherhood in America is going to be a good one. And then book-wise, the book that I had mentioned is called A Mom is Born. And what is the one called? It's like what they didn't tell you to expect, something like that. So you know how there is sort of that play on what to expect when you're expecting, that book that's been around for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. Well, that's a play on those words, is like what they didn't tell you to expect. And I know I'm saying that wrong. But it's about postpartum, like the stuff you didn't expect to be happening.
Yeah. And then also, if you could give some words of advice to some parents right now that are kind of going through this? Like, what could you tell them? You know,
the number one thing is you will not do it perfectly, and that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
None of us do it perfectly.
Yeah.
And the kids are going to be okay. Like, yeah, we all have problems. Like, there's no getting around it. But you cannot control every possible scenario for your kids. You can only be a safe place for them when they have a hard time, you know? And so you won't do it perfectly, and that is 100% okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing I was thinking of too, you know, especially nowadays, you know, with the divorce rate so high, over 50%, you know, a lot of these mothers are probably having to also, I mean, I guess it doesn't have to do with divorce rate, whether or not they're married or not, but they may be going through it by themselves without the father present, you know, and that's got to be difficult as well.
Oh gosh,
you know, to go through that alone. And it's sad. I can't judge anybody's situation. I don't know their story. I don't know their situation, but that's also got to be hard too, just by yourself and going through that as well.
Oh gosh, absolutely. Yeah, there are, I mean, so many different like family scenarios, you know,
I know.
that just can make it more challenging.
Yeah. And what's like another way that's like we could change society's view on dealing with this stuff? Like, because like you said, it's kind of something that's not discussed. Like, what is something out there that like you think that we could do and to change the way that we look at this and go about this?
Gosh, that's such a huge question.
I know it's loaded. It's kind of loaded.
There's so much of this that is cultural, and
as you can tell, I don't know too much about this.
That's
so
okay.
I'm trying.
I appreciate your curiosity.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of it is cultural, and it's like part of why I started this podcast again is like I love America. And I would like to see some things in America be better. This is a thing we don't do well in America is consider how to support one another in community. Now, it happens. It happens all the time. But we need to be better about this part of community, like what that actually looks like getting into the nitty gritty, getting into your friend's house and cleaning the floors and doing their laundry, like showing up in the middle of the night to help out with the baby, those kinds of things. Like we need to do those things for each other. Yeah. And
get back to that sense of community.
Exactly. Yeah. Like get in each other's business.
Yeah.
We are so like, I live in my own little house, like in my own private space. I don't want anybody in my business. And it's hurting us.
I know. It's sad. And I get it. You know, I probably do it too at times. You know, I can be kind of reserved. But yeah, I mean, you know, kind of going back to being able to have community, it's such a, I mean, that's probably why we're dealing with a lot of the mental health issues and depression issues, because we're all in these little boxes and we're just kind of to our own, you know, and looking at everything from our phone. So yeah, kind of what we talked about earlier. So yeah, I don't know how to change that. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think that's going to get better?
I think it could.
I know we can be optimistic about it, but like sometimes, I don't know. I go back and forth. I just think everything is which there's nothing wrong about it being digital. It's just, I don't know. Like you said, after COVID, I'd just seen it rapidly decline.
But the pendulum always swings, you know?
You are right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think so. I think that people are looking for connection again. Right.
Yeah, because I always use the VHS thing because there was somebody on who I was talking to, and they're like, "Oh yeah, VHSs are coming back," and I'm like, "What?" Yeah, I guess there's a guy here locally that literally sells these cool, now they're like $30 a pop.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, but it's neat. I mean, I get it. It's they're not making them anymore, so they're going to be worth something. But if I would have known this, I would have kept all my VHSs.
That's hilarious.
Actually, mom might actually have all that stuff in somewhere stored, but she keeps everything. So, but yeah, I appreciate you coming on. It was great,
for having me.
Great speaking to you. Is there anything else that you have coming up that you want to kind of throw out there, or anything you want to?
Just that, again, like with the podcast, what's out there right now is
what was the name of your podcast?
Motherhood in America.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. And so everything that's out there right now is about 9 years old, and that new episodes are coming starting next week.
Oh, those are older. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I've seen the legacy on the titles, but I didn't know they were all older episodes. Okay,
all
cool.
of them that have been posted so far, me just sharing the old stuff.
Yeah, they were really
And
good.
then- well,
so that's
thanks.
cool that you threw them back out.
yeah, man, doing a podcast 9 years ago is so different from today. But
I know 9 years ago. Oh my God, you're like a pioneer of podcasts.
I was.
What
so
happened? It
much
just
I
kind of
had
just
to
fell
learn.
off, or what?
I had a baby.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, it can be hard
I
to do
tried
both.
really hard to keep up on that, but I was kind of losing it. So
Was it audio only back then?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know. That's how I started too. Not this one, but the one I had prior. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's crazy to see like all the podcasts coming out nowadays, but here still in Kansas City is very new.
Mm-hmm.
Still very new. So it's cool that you're getting back into it and putting stuff out. So,
Yeah, it is cool.
yeah,
It's
that's
fun.
neat.
I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Stephanie. I appreciate you
you.
coming on.
Yeah.
All right.